I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is James Corbett, publisher of the CorbettReport.com and editorial writer for the International Forecaster. Welcome back to the show, James.
Well, thank you for having me on.
The Japanese government has announced their new stimulus plan, not as generous as we first thought it would be.
No, it has disappointed the markets, and, well, that means that it has not had the effect on the Japanese economy, let alone the markets that people were expecting. Basically, the headline number for this stimulus was $28 trillion, but the majority of that is in public-private shared ownership deals and things of that nature that don't necessarily directly affect what was going to be spent into the economy anyway. The remaining 13 trillion or so, 13.5 trillion, is going to be fiscal measures, quote unquote, of which 7.5 trillion yen will be additional spending by national and local governments, and there are earmarks on 6 trillion yen from something called the Fiscal Investment and Loan Program, which is basically a fund that is not actually included in the government's budget. So it's just extra budget money for them to play around with. But this is not what people were expecting or hoping for. They were looking for a more of a helicopter money drop, a direct injection of money into the economy. That didn't happen. And also the Bank of Japan disappointed by not increasing asset purchases, bond purchases, as people were expecting. They are going to increase their ETF purchases, but it's not exactly what people were looking for. Plus, they're going to hold interest rates steady. So it was a disappointment all around, and as a result, we have Asian stocks generally falling off, and we have Japanese shares specifically selling off as the yen starts to spike. So pretty much the exact opposite of what such a stimulus measure is meant to accomplish.
Well, you're still spending a lot of money and putting taxpayers on the hook for it. Either do the full deal and get the full benefit, or not do it at all.
Well, the question really is, how are they going to finance this new spending? And there is speculation that they're going to sell some construction bonds as part of the government's budget addendum later this year. But still, I think what this shows is that they are already so debt-laden that even the question of where this new spending is coming from is one that's concerning to the markets generally, and is, again, just a sign of weakness, certainly not a sign of strength.
Has Japan considered tax cuts to help stimulate the economy?
Quite the contrary. In fact, if they do go ahead according to the schedule that has been set, there will be a consumer tax increase next year on the consumption tax here, which was formerly 5%. It was raised to 8% a couple of years ago. It's supposed to be going up to 10% next year. There was a lot of speculation that might be held off, but I think no official word on that yet.
Haven't they done studies that show, really, if you want to put cash in consumers' hands, let them take home more? Doesn't that stimulate your economy?
Yes. Of course that's the case, but I think the question is that there really is growing concern about Japan's debt levels, which are the highest in the developed world. And last time I checked, something like 250% of GDP. So it's obviously quite a conundrum. And I think Japan is a glimpse into the future of extremely low interest rates for an extremely long time, extremely low inflation. There seems that after 2.5 decades of trying, absolutely nothing that the government has done has dug them out of this hole, and all they really have is a shovel. So it looks like all they can do is dig further down.
Is part of Japan's problem a very low birth rate?
That's certainly contributing to it. I mean, that's the pressure on the bottleneck down the road. I don't think that's necessarily the main concern at this precise moment, but it is certainly something that is coming to the fore, and that's being felt in a lot of different ways, including the pension funds here, which of course some of the largest pension fund in the world, the Japanese government pension investment fund, has been under pressure for a while, as obviously there are fewer workers and more people actually collecting on their pensions at this point. And the point of a lot of the stimulus in the last few years has been to try to get the GPIF off of its dependence on Japanese domestic debt in bonds, and to get them into the stock market. And Bloomberg actually had an article up the other day basically saying this is the prime time. Stocks are really high and shares are really low. I think it's time for the GPIF to start changing their investment strategy, but it still remains to be seen whether that's going to happen. And in such a notoriously conservative trading environment as Japan, where investors hate risk and love small, steady income, it's very difficult to get the Japanese public out of the mindset that investing in government bonds is the way to go.
Well, you were mentioning in our last report, Japan's largest bank won't sell government bonds.
That's right. One of the largest banks is being removed from the list of preferred sellers voluntarily, because it is not a very lucrative business at the moment with negative interest rates. So that's certainly a problem. There are other signs of major shakeups in an economy that again is fairly stable and consistent, where people don't like change very much at all. We have the big three trading houses here, Mitsubishi, Mitsui, and Sumitomo, which have dominated for the past century. But there is a relative new up-and-comer called Itochu Corp, which has actually just surpassed, for the first time in history, surpassed the profits of all three of those big three trading companies by taking the exact opposite trading strategy as them. The big three have been invested heavily in commodities and had huge write-downs over the last few years with commodity prices falling. Itochu specifically was investing in non-resource businesses and is profiting handsomely from that, with hundreds of billions of yen more profit than the other three, even more profit than the three combined in 2015. So that has been a winning strategy. So we see the big three now turning around, and they're saying they're going to start investing in more non-resource businesses to try to cover their losses. But again, I think it's just a sign there are some major changes happening here in a country that's not exactly happy with major changes.
Itochu Corporation now in North America. This is the first time I've heard of it. What do they do?
It's a trading company. It invests in various assets, but as I say, the big trading companies here are trading primarily in commodities and have been burnt as a result. So this bucking the trend upstart has come along to invest in non-resource businesses and is profiting handsomely.
Are people in Japan watching the Rio Olympics to find out how not to do it for the next Olympics in Tokyo?
Yeah, it certainly seems like there's a few things to be learned, isn't there? Yes, obviously, there's a lot of Olympic fever here. Japan is generally a sort of athletic, sports-based, they're very interested in sports generally, but of course, extra attention. Given the fact that 2020 is going to be taking place in Tokyo, I think the Olympic Committee here is quite interested. And I did see a report that the Olympic Committee, for the Japanese Olympic Committee, was considering canceling going to the Rio Games because of travel concerns, but I'm not sure if that played out or not.
Yeah, politically it doesn't look very good. Although Japan, I'm sure, would do a great job with the Olympics. And if you want to get a lesson on how to do it right, come to Vancouver. The Winter Games were ready with 2 years to go.
Unbelievable. And under budget?
Well, who knows when it comes to government numbers. The Olympic Village was a boondoggle. The city had to take it over, and they were selling them at a loss, but not that big a loss. It would have been bigger if the thing had collapsed economically. And now it is a thriving development, by the way. The Olympic Village looks terrific. It did look like a bunch of concrete boxes, but now trees have grown up around it and other things have moved in. It's, well, I guess it's Hipsterville. That's the people who live there.
Well, I'll let my Tokyo brethren know about that, and maybe they can copy that. But it's already a bit too late for that, as the Olympic construction is already behind schedule here in Tokyo.
Already. Well, just hire some crews from Vancouver. They'll get it done right. I heard a rumor, I don't know if it's true, about real estate in Japan, that if your house is more than a couple of years old, you're not going to get much for it, but they'll buy the land, but they're not interested in the house. Is that true?
Absolutely true. People don't tend to buy secondhand houses here. Generally, if you are buying something, you pay for the land, and you tear down the house and build a new one. It's usually, if not cheaper to do that, it's not a huge expense. The land is definitely the largest expense here.
We'll have more with James Corbett right after the break.
GEM International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. GEM International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with James Corbett. James, has there been any reaction in Asia to the 15% tax that Christy Clark, the BC Premier, has put on foreign real estate purchases only in the greater Vancouver area, but she said it could spread further afield if it doesn't work?
I haven't seen any reaction yet. I think it might be a little too early to tell. But my sense of this is that if someone is looking to pay millions of dollars for an abandoned shack just to get their toe into the Canadian real estate market, into Canadian territory, basically, something tells me the 15% tax isn't necessarily going to dissuade them. It will dissuade some people, but I'm sure that the most motivated buyers will not be deterred by it. So I'm skeptical as to whether it will have as much of an effect as I think the central planners would want this to have.
And also, if you're clever enough to get around the very strict money transfer rules in China itself, you're probably smart enough to get around the rules other governments might put up.
Well, this is the point. This is not just investors who are looking to make some money on some foreign investment. These are people who are looking to get around capital controls to get their money out of the Chinese system. They are highly motivated to do so, and if property in Vancouver is an easy outlet and there's a well-established route for people to get their money out that way, then it will happen. And again, I don't think 15% tax is necessarily going to be the deciding factor for a lot of people.
What's the fallout, Ben, for some of the scandals that hit the automotive industry in Japan? Airbags that don't work, Mitsubishi selling cars that don't meet their mileage claims. Has there been much fallout from it?
Well, not as quite as disastrous as you might expect. I saw that the numbers in late July show that auto production for the year up to June has fallen 1%, which is not exactly a precipitous plunge. So the Japanese auto industry is still producing. Certainly it's taken a hit, and I think internationally more so than in the Japanese domestic space. You don't see a lot of those scandal stories having a huge effect on the Japanese domestic markets. I think it's more foreign sales that's affecting.
How are auto sales in Japan?
Again, I don't have the latest auto sales number. I just have the exports and production. I saw that, in fact, although production was down 1% for the year up to June, exports actually rose 1.1% up to June. So again, that doesn't seem to be having a huge effect, the various scandals. But I don't have the domestic figures. I'm not sure what auto sales are like domestically at this point.
We haven't heard much about Fukushima. Is it still melting away?
Well, it's still, the cores are still wherever they are, and we still don't precisely know where they are. Somewhere, and hopefully within the ultimate containment. But again, that's still quite up in the air. So yes, it's still a problem. And of course, radioactive water is still leaking out into the Pacific. And I read a headline the other day. I don't have the details on it, but it looks like the Japanese government is looking to approve soil that's contaminated up to 8,000 becquerels per, I'm not sure on the figure, I think per cubic meter, but 8,000 becquerels anyway detectable in the soil, to approve that for use in various construction projects around Japan. So it looks like they're looking to basically raise the radioactivity limits once again.
So you should check out your property with a Geiger counter before you buy it.
might not be a bad idea in this environment, unfortunately.
Are people worried about radioactivity in their fish?
There was some concern about that here, not a lot, certainly not as much as you would expect, and to the extent that that still lingers, I'm really not sure. I certainly haven't noticed any difference whatsoever purchasing fish or going to the sushi restaurants here. It certainly doesn't seem to have affected business in any appreciable way, and I do know that directly in the year or two after Fukushima, there was, in the supermarkets and things, you would find little labels on food, radiation tested and that kind of thing. I don't even see that anymore. So I think that concerns have basically gone away, and it looks like Japanese consumers are back to business as usual.
Is there any other, what I would call water cooler talk about the economy in Japan that we're not hearing here?
I don't think any of it would be particularly surprising. I think obviously people are greatly concerned about the economy, but there's certainly no ideas about what else to do, and I think that was perhaps best reflected in the recent upper house elections, where the ruling party didn't just continue to win; it won even more seats. So now it has an even greater share of the Japanese parliament. Again, people are just at a loss. There doesn't seem to be anything. There's no new ideas on the horizon, and obviously the big ideas of Abenomics failed. I think there's almost a sense of almost learned helplessness here in the economy, that people are just getting used to the idea that the economy will only ever expand by a minuscule amount, if even that. And I don't think people are particularly optimistic about what's happening here.
Has Japan ever tried baby bonuses to encourage a higher birth rate?
There are various, depending on the prefecture. I think on the prefectural level, there are different programs for tax rebates or for small direct payments for people with young children. But that does vary prefecture to prefecture. I'm assuming that might be part of what this stimulus money is ultimately going to be spent on. It would certainly make sense, again, in a country with a declining birth rate, a very precipitously declining birth rate, and in fact a shrinking population that is looking for ways to increase the population. That would probably be one of the best uses for that type of money, and that's the type of direct stimulus that could have been used with this stimulus, but we'll see if it filters down through the prefectural level down to some parents.
Well, Canada just started its direct payment to parents, depending on how much money you make. So you get quite a bit of money if you have a low income, and it's cut off totally, I think, if you hit $200,000. Although I think if you make, in Vancouver, $100,000 isn't a lot of money.
Certainly not with property prices like that.
Yeah. James, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you for having me on.
My guest has been James Corbett, publisher of thecorbettreport.com. He's also an editorial writer for the International Forecaster. He was speaking to us from Japan, where he's lived and worked since 2004. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Comments or questions for the show can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.